The Path to Peace and Freedom for the Mind, 2. By Ajaan Lee Dhammadharo. Translated from the Thai by Thanissaro Bhikkhu, Geoffrey DeGraff. The first heading, Virtue. There are 3 levels of virtue. 1. Himisla, normalcy of word and deed, which consists of 3 kinds of bodily acts. Not killing, not stealing, not engaging in sexual misconduct. And 4 kinds of speech. Not lying, not speaking divisively, not saying anything coarse or abusive, not speaking idly. If we class virtue on this level according to the wording of the precepts and the groups of people who observe them, there are 4. The 5 precepts, the 8, the 10, and the 227 precepts. All of these deal with aspects of behavior that should be abandoned, termed pa-na-kika. At the same time, the Buddha directed us to develop good manners and proper conduct in the use of the 4 necessities of life: food, clothing, shelter, and medicine. So that our conduct in terms of thought, word, and deed will be orderly and becoming. This aspect is termed bhvankika, behavior we should work at developing correctly. Observance of these precepts or rules, dealing merely with words and deeds, forms the lower or preliminary level of virtue, which is what makes us into full-fledged human beings, manasa sampatti. 2. Mahimisla, the medium level of virtue, i.e., keeping watch over your words and deeds so that they cause no harm. And, in addition, keeping watch over your thoughts so as to keep your mental kama upright in 3 ways. A. Anabhijhavisamalobha, not coveting things that do not belong to you and that lie beyond your scope or powers. Not focusing your thoughts on such things, not building what are called castles in the air. The Buddha taught us to tend to the wealth we already have so that it can grow on its own. The wealth we already have, if we use our intelligence and ingenuity, will draw more wealth our way without our having to waste energy by being covetous or greedy. For example, suppose we have a single banana tree. If we water it, give it fertilizer, loosen the soil around its roots, and protect it from dangers, our single banana tree will eventually give rise to an increase of other banana trees. In other words, if we're intelligent, we can turn whatever wealth we have into a basis for a livelihood. But if we lack intelligence, if our hearts simply want to get, without wanting work, then even if we acquire a great deal of wealth, we won't be able to support ourselves. Thus, greed of this sort, in which we focus our desires above and beyond our capacities, is classed as a wrong kind of mental action. Abhiupada, abandoning thoughts of ill will, hatred, and vengeance, and developing thoughts of goodwill instead, thinking of the good aspects of the people who have angered us. When people make us angry, it comes from the fact that our dealings with them, in which we associate with and assist one another, sometimes lead to disappointment. This gives rise to dislike and irritation, which in turn cause us to brood, so that we develop hurt feelings that grow into anger and thoughts of retaliation. Thus we should regard such people from many angles, for ordinarily as human beings they should have some good to them. If they don't act well toward us, they may at least speak well to us. Or if they don't act or speak well to us, perhaps their thoughts may be well-meaning to at least some extent. Thus, when you find your thoughts heading in the direction of anger or dislike, you should sit down and think in 2 ways. 1. Try to think of whatever ways that person has been good to you. When these things come to mind, they'll give rise to feelings of affection, love, and goodwill. This is one way. 2. Anger is something worthless, like the scum floating on the surface of a lake. If we're stupid, we won't get to drink the clean water lying underneath, or if we drink the scum, we may catch a disease. A person who is bad to you is like someone sunk in filth. If you're stupid enough to hate or be angry with such people, it's as if you wanted to go sit in the filth with them. Is that what you want? Think about this until any thoughts of ill will and anger disappear. See Samadhitya, abandoning wrong views and mental darkness. If our minds lack the proper training and education, we may come to think that we and all other living beings are born simply as accidents of nature. That father and mother have no special meaning. That good and evil don't exist. Such views deviate from the truth. They can dissuade us from restraining the evil that lies within us and from searching for and fostering the good. To believe that there's no good or evil, that death is annihilation, is wrong view, a product of short-sighted thinking and poor discernment, seeing things for what they aren't. So we should abandon such views and educate ourselves, searching for knowledge of the Dhamma and associating with people wiser than we, so that they can show us the bright path. We'll then be able to reform our views and make them right, which is one form of mental uprightness. Virtue on this level, when we can maintain it well, will qualify us to be heavenly beings. The qualities of heavenly beings, which grow out of human values, will turn us into human beings who are divine in our virtues. For to guard our thoughts, words, and deeds means that we qualify for heaven in this lifetime. This is one aspect of the merit developed by a person who observes the middle level of virtue. 3. Upparamisla, higher virtue, where virtue merges with the Dhamma in the area of mental activity. There are two sides to higher virtue. Apahanakika, qualities to be abandoned, which are of 5 sorts. 1. Kamachanda, affection, desire, laxity, infatuation. 2. Vyapada, ill will and hatred. 3. Thnamita, discouragement, drowsiness, sloth. 4. Adakakukaksa, restlessness and anxiety. 5. Visikika, doubt, uncertainty, indecision. Discussion. 1. Ill will, vyapada, lies at the essence of killing, panatipada, for it causes us to destroy our own goodness and that of others. And when our mind can kill off our own goodness, what's to keep us from killing other people and animals as well? 2. Restlessness, adaka, lies at the essence of taking what isn't given, adinadana. The mind wanders about, taking hold of other people's affairs, sometimes their good points, sometimes their bad. To fasten onto their good points isn't too serious, for it can give us at least some nourishment. As long as we're going to steal other people's business and make it our own, we might as well take their silver and gold. Their bad points, though, are like trash they've thrown away. Scraps and bones with nothing of any substance. And yet even so we let the mind feed on them. When we know that other people are possessive of their bad points and guard them well, and yet we still take hold of these things to think about. It should be classed as a form of taking what isn't given. 3. Sensual desires, kamachanda, lie at the essence of sensual misconduct. The mind feels an attraction for sensual objects. Thoughts of past or future sights, sounds, smells, tastes, or tactile sensations. Or for sensual defilements. Passion, aversion, or delusion. To the point where we forget ourselves. Mental states such as these can be said to overstep the bounds of propriety in sensual matters. 4. Doubt, visikika, lies at the essence of lying. In other words, our minds are unsure, with nothing reliable or true to them. We have no firm principles and so drift along under the influence of all kinds of thoughts and preoccupations. 5. Drowsiness, thnamita, is intoxication, discouragement, dullness, forgetfulness, with no mindfulness or restraint watching over the mind. This is what it means to be drugged or drunk. All of these unskillful qualities are things we should eliminate by training the heart along the lines of Vibhavnakika, qualities to be developed. 1. Mindfulness, sati. Start out by directing your thoughts to an object, such as your in and out breathing. Use mindfulness to steady the mind in its object throughout both the in-breath and the out. Vitaka, thinking in this way, is what kills off sensual desires, in that the discipline of mindfulness keeps the mind from slipping off into external objects. 2. Vikara, evaluate and be observant. Make yourself aware of whether or not you've received a sense of comfort and relaxation from your in and out breathing. If not, tend to the breath and adjust it in a variety of ways, e.g. in long and out long, in long and out short, in short and out short, in short and out long, in slow and out slow, in fast and out fast. In gently and out gently, in strong and out strong, in throughout the body and out throughout the body. Adjust the breath until it gives good results to both body and mind, and you'll be able to kill off feelings of ill will and hatred. 3. When you get good results. For instance, when the subtle breath sensations in the body merge and flow together, permeating the entire sense of the body. The breath is like an electric wire, the various parts of the body, such as the bones, are like electricity poles. Mindfulness and alertness are like a power source, and awareness is thus bright and radiant. Both body and mind feel satisfied and full. This is or rapture, which can kill off feelings of drowsiness. 4. Sukha, now that feelings of restlessness and anxiety have disappeared, a sense of pleasure and ease arises for both body and mind. This pleasure is what kills off restlessness. 5. Ekajita, doubts and uncertainty fade into the distance. The mind reaches singleness of preoccupation in a state of normalcy and equilibrium. This normalcy of mind, which is maintained through the power of the discipline of mindfulness, sathivanya, forms the essence of virtue, firmness, steadiness, stability. And the resulting flavor or nourishment of virtue is a solitary sense of calm for the mind. When freedom of this sort arises within us, this is called the development of slanasati, the mindfulness of virtue. This is virtue that attains excellence, leading to the paths, their fruitions, and nibbana. And thus can be called uparamisla, higher virtue. To summarize, there are 3 levels of virtue: external, intermediate, and internal. In ultimate terms, however, there are 2. 1 mundane virtue, virtue connected with the world, in which we maintain the principles of ordinary human morality but are as yet unable to reach the transcendent levels. Stream entry, once returning, non-returning, and arahantship. We can't yet cut the fetters, sanayojana, that tie the heart to the influences of all the worlds. This is thus called mundane virtue. 2 transcendent virtue, virtue that's constant and sure, going straight to the heart, bathing the heart with its nourishment. This arises from the practice of tranquility meditation and insight meditation. Tranquility meditation forms the cause, and insight meditation the result. Discovering the true nature of the properties, aggregates, khandhas, and senses. Seeing clearly the 4 noble truths, in proportion to our practice of the path, and abandoning the first 3 of the fetters. Asakyaditya, self-identity views that see the body or the aggregates as in the self or as belonging to the self. Ordinarily, we may be convinced that views of this sort are mistaken, yet we can't really abandon them. But when we clearly see that they're wrong for sure, this is called right view. Seeing things as they truly are, which can eliminate such wrong views as seeing the body as belonging to the self, or the self as the 5 aggregates, or the 5 aggregates as in the self. Vivisakika, doubt about what's genuine and true, and what's counterfeit and false. The power of right view allows us to see that the quality to which we awaken exists at all times and that the true qualities enabling us to awaken also exist, and are made effective through the power of the practices we're following. Our knowledge is definite and true. Our doubts about the virtues of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha are cleared up for good. This is called becoming a Nyatapugala, a person who is certain and sure. See Slabataparamisa. When the heart abandons this fetter, it no longer fondles theories concerning moral virtue. It's no longer stuck merely on the level of manners and activities. Good and evil are accomplished through the heart, activities are something separate. Even though people who reach this level do good, taking the precepts, making gifts and offerings, or meditating in line with the good customs of the world, they're not caught up on any of these things, because their hearts have reached the nourishment of virtue. They aren't stuck on the particulars, bhyanjana, i.e., their activities. Nor are they stuck on the purpose, atha, i.e., the meaning or intent of their various good manners. Their hearts dwell in the nourishment of virtue, tranquility, stability, normalcy of mind. Just as a person who has felt the nourishment that comes from food permeating his body isn't stuck on either the food or its flavor, because he's received the benefits of the nourishment it provides. In the same way, the hearts of people who have reached the essence of virtue are no longer stuck on activities or manners, particulars or purposes, because they've tasted virtue's nourishment. This is thus classed as transcendent virtue, the first stage of nibbana. Even though such people may be destined for further rebirth, they're special people, apart from the ordinary. Anyone whose practice reaches this level can be counted as fortunate, as having received dependable wealth, like ingots of gold. Just as gold can be used as currency all over the world because it has special value for all human beings. Unlike paper currency, whose use is limited to specific countries. In the same way, a heart that has truly attained virtue has a value in this life that will remain constant in lives to come. Thus, a person who has reached this level has received part of the noble wealth of those who practice the religion. The second heading, concentration. Concentration has three levels. 1. Kamavakarakanika momentary concentration in the sensory realm. The mind keeps thinking, coming to rest, and running along after skillful preoccupations, either internal or external. On the sensory level, Kamavakarikosala sights, sounds, smells, flavors, tactile sensations, or ideas. An example of this is when the mind becomes quiet and rested for a moment as we sit chanting or listening to a sermon. In other words, the mind grows still for momentary periods in the same way that a person walks. One foot takes a step while the other foot rests on the ground, providing the energy needed to reach one's goal. This is thus called momentary concentration, something possessed by people all over the world. Whether or not we practice concentration, the mind is always behaving this way by its very nature. This is called the bhavangasita or bhavangapita. The mind stops for a moment and then moves on. In developing higher levels of concentration, we have to start out with this ordinary level as our basis. Otherwise, the higher levels probably wouldn't be possible. Still, this level of concentration can't be used as a basis for discernment, which is why we have to go further in our practice. 2. Rupavakara Upakara Samadhi, threshold concentration in the realm of form. This refers to the first jhana, in which the mind comes inward to rest on a single preoccupation within the body, fixing its attention, for example, on the in and out breath. When the mind stays with its one object, this is called ekajit. At the same time, there's mindfulness keeping the breath in mind, this is called vitaka. The mind then adjusts and expands the various aspects of the breath throughout the entire body, evaluating them mindfully with complete circumspection. This is called alertness, sampajana, or vikara, which is the factor aware of causes and results. Mindfulness, the cause, is what does the work. Thus vitaka and vikara cooperate in focusing on the same topic. We are then aware of the results as they arise. Feelings of fullness, pleasure, and ease, ti and sukha, for body and mind. At this point, the mind lets down its burdens to rest for a while, like a person walking along who meets with something pleasing and attractive. And so stops to look, both feet are standing still, stepping neither forward nor back. If we aren't skilled enough to go on any further, we'll then retreat. If we see results, such as signs and visions, arising in the mind, we may get excited and so cause our original preoccupation to waver or fade. Like a person sitting on a chair. If he sees something appealing in front of him, he may become so interested that he leans forward and reaches out his hand. He may even begin to budge a bit from his seat or stand up completely. In the same way, if we get engrossed in visions, thoughts, or views while we're engaged in threshold concentration, we can become excited and pleased. We may even think that we've reached the transcendent. And this can cause our concentration to degenerate. If we try to do it again and can't, we may then seize the opportunity to say that we've gone beyond the practice of concentration. So that we can now take the way of discernment. Thinking, pondering, and letting go in line with nothing more than our own views and ideas. This, though, is not likely to succeed, because our knowledge has no firm basis or core, like a wheel with no axle or hub. How can it get anywhere? The power of threshold concentration, if we don't watch after it well, is bound to deteriorate, and we'll be left with nothing but old, leftover concepts. 3. Rupavakarappanasamadhi, fixed penetration in the realm of form. This refers to the practice of all 4 levels of rupa jhana. The first jhana has 5 factors: directed thought, evaluation, fullness, pleasure, and singleness of preoccupation. The second jhana has 3, fullness, pleasure, and singleness of preoccupation. The third has 2, pleasure and singleness of preoccupation, and the fourth has 2, equanimity and singleness of preoccupation. Discussion. Fixed penetration in the realm of form means that the mind focuses on the internal sense of the body, remaining steadily with a single object, such as the in and out breath, until it reaches jhana, beginning with the first level, which is composed of directed thought, evaluation, fullness, pleasure, and singleness of preoccupation. When you see results arising, focus in on those results and they will then turn into the second jhana, which has 3 factors: fullness, pleasure, and singleness of preoccupation. As your focus becomes stronger, it causes the sense of fullness to waver, so you can now let go of that sense of fullness. And your concentration turns into the third jhana, in which only 2 factors are left: pleasure and singleness of preoccupation. The mind has few burdens, its focus is strong and the sense of inner light is radiant. This causes the feeling of pleasure to waver, so that you can let go of that sense of pleasure, and the mind attains oneness in a very subtle preoccupation. The preoccupation doesn't waver and neither does the mind. It stands firm in its freedom. This is called equanimity and singleness of preoccupation, which form the fourth jhana. Mindfulness is powerful, alertness, complete. Both are centered on a single preoccupation without getting snagged on any other illusions or perceptions. This mental state is called the fourth jhana, which has 2 factors. Equanimity is the external attitude of the mind. As for the real factors, they're mindfulness and singleness, steady and firm. The mind experiences a sense of brightness, the radiance that comes from its state of fixed penetration. Mindfulness and alertness are circumspect and all-round, and so give rise to skill and proficiency in practicing jhana. In focusing, staying in place, stepping through the various levels, withdrawing, going back and forth. When the mind behaves as you want it to, no matter when you practice, only then does this truly qualify as fixed penetration. The basis for the arising of 3 qualities: intuitive knowledge, jnana, discernment, panna, and cognitive skill, vijja. Intuitive knowledge here refers to knowledge or sensitivity of an extraordinary sort. For example, Pabbanivasanossati jnana, the ability to remember previous lives. Kutupapata jnana, the ability to focus on the death and rebirth of other living beings. Sometimes in good destinations, sometimes in bad. Together with the causes that lead them to be reborn in such ways. This gives rise to a sense of weariness and disenchantment with sensations and mental acts, body and mind. Visavakkhaya jnana, knowing how to put an end to the defilements of the heart in accordance with the knowledge. The clear vision of the 4 noble truths that accompanies the particular transcendent path reached. And there are still other forms of extraordinary knowledge, such as adhivid, the ability to display supernormal powers, to make an image of oneself appear to other people. Dibbasoda, clairaudience, dibbakakku, clairvoyance, i.e., the ability to see objects at tremendous distances. Discernment refers to discriminating knowledge, clear comprehension, knowledge in line with the truth. For example, athapisamhita, acumen with regard to aims and results, thoroughgoing comprehension of cause and effect. Knowing, for example, how stress is caused by ignorance and craving, and how the disbanding of stress is caused by the intuitive discernment that forms the path. Comprehending the meaning and aims of the Buddha's various teachings and knowing how to explain them so that other people will understand. Being able, for instance, to summarize a long passage without distorting its meaning. Dhammapatisamhita, acumen with regard to mental qualities, knowing how to explain deep and subtle points so that other people will understand. Nirutipatissamhita, acumen with regard to different languages. According to the texts, this includes knowing foreign languages and the languages of various other living beings by means of the eye of discernment, panakaku. Patibhanapatissamhita, acumen with regard to expression. Being fluent in making explanations and quick-wit in debate, knowing the most strategic way to express things. All of these forms of discernment can arise from training the mind to attain fixed penetration. Vijja, clear, open knowledge, free from any further concealments, and loka. Brilliance, radiance streaming out in all directions. Enable us to see the true nature of sensations and mental acts, in accordance with our powers of intuitive discernment. Cognitive skill refers to clear, uncanny knowledge that arises from the mind's being firmly fixed in jhana. There are 8 sorts. 1. Vipassanajnana, clear comprehension of physical sensations and mental acts, rupa, nama. 2. Manomayati, psychic powers, influencing events through the power of thought. 3. Idhivad, the ability to display powers, making one's body appear in a variety of ways. 4. Dibakaku, clairvoyance. 5. Dibasoda, clairaudience. 6. Sitapariyanana, the ability to know the mental states of other people. 7. Pubanivasanusadinana, the ability to remember previous lives. 8. Visavakhayanana, the ability to put an end to the fermentations that defile the heart. Thus, jhana on the level of fixed penetration is extremely important. It can give us support on all sides on the level of the world and of the Dhamma and can bring success in our various activities. Both in our worldly affairs and in our Dhamma duties, leading us on to the transcendent. To summarize, there are 2 kinds of concentration. One that which gives rise to mundane knowledge, this is termed mundane concentration. 2 that which helps us to fulfill our duties on the level of the Dhamma, leading to Vipassanajnana or Asavakhayanana. The knowledge that enables us in accordance with the discernment and cognitive skills that arise to abandon or cut off completely the mental currents tending in the direction of the fetters. This is termed transcendent concentration. The third heading, discernment. Discernment is of 3 kinds. 1. Suddhamayapana, discernment that comes from studying. 2. Sintamayapana, discernment that comes from reflecting. 3. Bhavanamayapana, discernment that comes from developing the mind. Discussion. Suddhamayapana is the discernment that comes from having listened a great deal, like the Venerable Phananda. Listening here, though, includes studying and taking interest in a variety of ways. Paying attention, taking notes, asking questions, and taking part in discussions so as to become quick-wit and astute. Education of all kinds comes down to 2 sorts. A. Learning the basic units, such as the letters of the alphabet, their sound and pronunciation, so as to understand their accepted usage. And, B. Learning how to put them together. For instance, how to combine the letters so as to give rise to words and meanings. As when we complete our elementary education so that we won't be at a loss when we're called on to read and write in the course of making a living. In the area of the religion, we have to study the letters of the Pali alphabet, their combinations, their meanings, and their pronunciation. If we don't understand clearly, we should take an interest in asking questions. If we have trouble memorizing, we should jot down notes as a way of aiding our memory and expanding our concepts. In addition, we have to study by means of our senses. For example, when we see a visual object, we should find out its truth. When we hear sounds or words, we should find out their truth. When we smell an aroma, we should consider it to see what it comes from. We should take an interest in flavors so that we know what they come from. and in tactile sensations the heat and cold that touch the body by studying such things as the way weather behaves. All of these forms of education are ways of giving rise to astuteness both in the area of the world and in the area of the Dhamma because they constitute a basic level of knowledge. Like the primary education offered in schools. 2. Sintamayapana refers to thinking and evaluating so as to learn the meaning and truth of one's beginning education. This level of education draws out the meaning of the knowledge we have gained through studying. When we gain information, we should reflect on it until we understand it so that we will be led by our sense of reason and not by gullibility or ignorance. This is like a person who has used his knowledge of the alphabet to gain knowledge from books to complete his secondary education. Such a person has reached the level where he can think things through clearly. In the area of the Dhamma, the same holds true. Once we have learned the basics, we should research and think through the content of the teaching until we give rise to an understanding, so that we can conduct ourselves correctly in line with the methods and aims taught by the sages of the past. This level of discernment is what prepares us to conduct ourselves properly in line with the truths of the doctrine and discipline. This is classed as an aspect of Pariyatti Dhamma, Dhamma on the level of theory. By learning the language and meaning of the teaching, we can become astute as far as theory is concerned. But if we don't use that knowledge to train ourselves, it's as if we studied a profession such as law but then went out to become bandits. So that our knowledge wouldn't give its proper results. For this reason, we've been taught still another method, which is the wellspring of discernment or mastery, i.e., the mental activity termed bhavanamayapana. 3. Bhavanamayapana, discernment that arises exclusively from training the mind in concentration. In other words, this level of discernment isn't related to the old observations we've gained from the past. Because our old observations are bound to obscure the new observations, endowed with the truth, that can arise only right at the mind. When you engage in this form of practice, focus exclusively on the present, taking note of a single thing, not getting involved with past or future. Steady the mind, bringing it into the present. Gather virtue, concentration, and discernment all into the present. Think of your meditation object and bring your powers of evaluation to bear on it. Say. By immersing mindfulness in the body, focusing on such objects as the in and out breath. When you do this, knowledge will arise. Nanamudapati, intuitive knowledge of things we have never before studied or known will appear. For example, Pubbanivasanosadinana. The ability to remember our present life and past lives, Kutupapatanana. The ability to know living beings as they die and are reborn. Well or poorly, happily or miserably. Knowing the causes and results of how they fare, Asavakhayanana. The ability to cleanse ourselves of the fermentations that defile the mind, thinning them out or eliminating them altogether, as we are able. These 3 forms of knowledge don't arise for people who simply study or think things through in ordinary ways. They form a mental skill that arises from the practice of concentration and are an aspect of Dhamma on the level of practice, Padapati Dhamma. Another aspect, Panahudapati, clear discernment of the true nature of the properties, dhatu, aggregates, and sense media arises. We can focus on these things by way of the mind and know them in terms of the 4 noble truths. Stress, dukkha, which arises from a cause, samudaya, i.e., ignorance and craving. And then niraya, the ceasing and disbanding of stress, which occurs as the result of a cause, i.e., the path, magga, composed of practices for the mind. These things can be known by means of the discernment that arises exclusively and directly within us and is termed the eye of discernment or the eye of Dhamma. The eye of the mind, awakening from its slumbers. Vijayudapati, the 8 forms of cognitive skill, which follow the laws of cause and effect. Means of practice that bring us results. Can arise in a quiet mind. Philikoudapati, brightness, clarity, relief, and emptiness arise in such a mind. Thus, the discernment that results from developing the mind differs from the beginning stages of discernment that come from studying and reflecting. Study and reflection are classed as Dhamma on the level of theory, and can give only a preliminary level of knowledge. They're like a person who has awakened but has yet to open his eyes. The discernment that comes from developing the mind, though, is like waking up and seeing the truth past, present, and future in all four directions. We can clearly see stress, its cause, its disbanding, and the path to its disbanding, and so can absolutely abandon the first set of fetters. Our hearts will then flow to Nibbana, just as the water in a mountain cataract is sure to flow to the sea. They will flow to their natural truth. The mental fullness and completeness of a person who has practiced mental development until discernment arises within. We will meet with a special form of skill. Transcendent skill. Whose power will stay with us always, a quality that's certain and sure, termed certain truth, certain wisdom, making us people certain for Nibbana. So this level of discernment, termed the discernment of liberating insight, is especially important. It arises on its own, not from cogitating along the lines of old concepts we've learned, but from abandoning them. Old concepts are what obscure the new knowledge ready to arise. The nature of liberating insight is like an electric light, simply press the switch once, and things all around are made bright. In the same way, when the mind reaches a stage of readiness, insight will arise in a single mental instant, and everything will become clear. Properties, aggregates, and the sense media will know, on the one hand, what's inconstant, anicam, stressful, duksum, and not self, nikam. And on the other hand, what's uncommon, i.e., nikam, what's constant and true. Suksam, true happiness, termed niramasasukha, and atta the self. The eye of the mind can know both sides and let go both ways. It's attached neither to what's inconstant, stressful, and not self, nor to what's constant, nikam, good, suksam, and right, atta. It can let these things go, in line with their true nature. The knowledge that comes from discernment, cognitive skill, and intuitive insight, it can let go as well. It isn't attached to views, for there's yet another, separate sort of reality that has no this or that. In other words, it doesn't have the view or conceit that I am. It lets go of the assumptions that, that's the self, that's not self, that's constant, that's inconstant, that arises, that doesn't arise. It can let go of these things completely. That's the Dhamma, and yet it doesn't hold on to the Dhamma, which is why we say that the Dhamma is not self. It also doesn't hold on to the view that says, not self. It lets go of views, causes, and effects, and isn't attached to anything at all dealing with wordings or meanings, conventions or practices. This, then, is discernment that arises from the development of the mind. To summarize, the discernment that comes from studying and reflecting is classed as Dhamma on the level of theory. The discernment that comes from developing the mind is classed as Dhamma on the level of practice. The results that arise are two. 1. Mundane discernment, comprehension of the world and the Dhamma, falling under mundane influences and subject to change. 2. Transcendent discernment, awareness that goes beyond the ordinary, giving rise to clear realization within. People who reach this level are said to have awakened and opened their eyes, which is what is meant by Buddha. To summarize everything, there are three main points. 1. Virtue, which in terms of where its principles are found is the Vinyapitaka. 2. Concentration, which in terms of where its principles are found is the Sutta Pitaka. 3. Discernment, which in terms of where its principles are found is the Abhidhamma Pitaka. Expressed in terms of their meaning, they refer to three modes of behavior to be developed. 1. Virtue, keeping our words and deeds honest and in good order. This is a means of killing off one of the causes of stress, i.e., kama tanha, sensual craving, mental states that take pleasure in growing attached and involved in sights, sounds, smells, flavors, tactile sensations, and ideas. Known through the senses of sight, hearing, smell, taste, feeling, and ideation. 2. Concentration, steadying the mind in a single preoccupation, holding fast to the present. Not latching onto thoughts of past or future. Concentration is a means of killing off bhava tanha, craving to be what one isn't, i.e. mental states that stray off into thoughts of past and future. The act of straying is craving for becoming, looking for a new place to take birth. This is what is meant by samhavisan. When concentration arises, the mind can let go of such craving. 3. Discernment, circumspect knowledge that guards over the mind to keep it from being influenced, involved, and attached. Discernment is what enables us to abandon vibhava tanha, craving not to be what one is. In that the characteristic of this form of craving is the wavering that occurs in the mental moment arising in the present. This we can perceive through intuitive discernment. Discernment knows stress, intuitive knowledge cuts the root of stress, cognitive skill. Clear knowledge of past, future, and present. Distinguishes cause, result, and release, without being attached. This is what's meant by the skill of release. And that is the heart of the Buddha's teachings. Etam buddhana sanat.